So today we are doing a yarn of a tale, the science and spinning of wool. And we have someone coming in. So Charlene will be coming in.
Friends.
Yes. Hello, Charlene. Welcome.
Hi.
So feel free to have your video on or not. And we should be sharing the screen. So if you can hear us, feel free to type in a yes or type in anything in the group chat. I'll be monitoring. I'm Katrine. I'm with the Girl Scouts of Wisconsin Badgerland. I am partnerships and volunteer manager. I'll let in another friend over here. Oh, awesome. That's great. You can hear us.
Sweet.
And we have two more friends coming in. Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. Alrighty. So I'll just go ahead and start since we are at 10 o'clock. Like I said, I'm Katrine. I'm with the Girl Scouts of Wisconsin Badgerland. I'll be monitoring the chat, so feel free to chat at me. You can keep your videos on or off. It'd be great to have your first name, so if you have any questions and we can call on you, that would probably be best, just so we know who we're talking to on the call. This is being recorded so that you can see the instructions and listen to Christine again later if needs be. We'll go through, like I said, Girl Scout Promise and Law, and then we'll get to listen to our wool expert. So thank you for being here, our wool expert today.
I don't know if I'm an expert, but I'm sure enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, that counts. You know more than me. You're an expert. To examine the science between fabrics and accessories for the Science of Style badge. And then we will do some next steps and wrap up and review. And feel free to ask any questions that you have. There's not a lot of people on the call, so we can definitely, help you out as needed. So I'm just going to mute us all for a sec. Oh, so gentle reminder, if you have your materials, and I listed it right here, 1/2 inch screw-in hook, a 1/4 inch wooden dowel, cut down to 8 inches long, any letter cap, pliers, wood roving, and it's okay if you don't have it. We're recording, so you can do this activity later. You can watch Chrisetta do it, and then go ahead and do it on your own time. Awesome, yay. I'll lead us all in the promise and the law, and then do an intro. So, on my honor, I will try to serve my community and my country, to help people at all times, and to live by the Girl Scout law. I will do my best to be honest and fair, friendly and helpful, considerate and caring, courageous and strong, and responsible for what I say and do, and to respect myself and others, respect authority, use resources wisely, make the world a better place, and be a sister to every Girl Scout. Awesome. Thank you all. So Chrisetta is our wool expert. Chrisetta's been crocheting since middle school, knitting since high school, and has added spinning and cleaning wool to their list of fiber art skills. Chrisetta started spinning about 2 years ago and now owns 4 spindles and a spinning wheel and piles of raw wool. So thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I don't know what just happened with my screen. Yeah, so I've been super interested in fiber art since I was a kid. My grandmother was one of those people that anytime she had hands-free, she was crocheting, and she was an absolute beast at getting projects out. Like, for example, I'm one of 26 of her grandkids. And there was 1 year where she decided to crochet all of her grandkids blankets, twin size, full size bed blankets. I still have mine. It's sitting out in my living room. So she's the reason why I kind of started learning about fiber art. So I started with crocheting, learned how to knit in high school, learned how to needle felt in college. And then one of my friends was talking about how she kind of really wanted to learn how to spin again. She tried once before, and it just, the spindle wasn't right. And I actually, she gave it to me, and I threw it back at her recently because I was just like, this is not an okay spindle. But so she started, and then I caught up a couple months later, and now we just have a whole fleet of spindles and spinning wheels. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of spinning fiber. So I'm super interested in these like super old crafts, and spinning is one of the oldest. So it is kind of estimated that we started spinning as human beings like 20,000 years ago. It actually predates written language, is how old spinning is. What they started first is that they would take fiber. So like here I've got my little chunk of roving, and they would take it and they would just spin it or drag their hand across their thigh and get a little bit of twist in their fiber, and then they would add another chunk and keep doing that until they had like a yarn or a rope. So that was the first technique of spinning for humans. From there, they developed tools to help with it. So one tool that they had was basically incorporating a stick. So same kind of motion where they're rolling the stick across their thigh, but at least this time they had some place to put the spun fiber. So it's kind of the development of a bobbin. There's also the use of rocks. So they would take some of their fiber, they would tie it to a rock, and they would spin the rock, and that way you could get the gravity pulling down the yarn, and then get that spin in at the same time. And then they would just wrap it, keep doing that. So those are the two things that developed spindles. So let me see here. I have a couple images. Oh, let me remove my email real quick. So I have a couple images of some examples of spindles that exist, but I don't have. So here is can you see it? Okay, so this is an image of what we call a bead spindle. So at the bottom here, there's this bead. These have been used for thousands and thousands of years. You can find like the beads of ancient spinners in museums. So you've got the bead at the bottom, which is the weight, and then you've got the shaft, which is your bobbin. So this is still used today, and usually it's supported, so it usually has like a little cup that it spins in. And then there is a bottom whirl spindle. So bottom whirl is, so everything is basically spindles are built the same way. So you've got the shaft, the stick, and then you've got a weight. So bottom whirl has the weight on the bottom. So what I typically use is, this is the top whirl. This is basically what we're going to be making today. This is one that I bought for, I think, like $15. They're fairly cheap, but, you know, homemade stuff is cool. So this is a top whirl. It's got the weight on the top. And then one of my favorite types of spindles is called a Turkish spindle, which is technically a bottom whirl, but it's got these arms. And this is really cool because you can wrap your yarn around it, and then once you have your arms full, you can take it apart, and then you have a center pull yarn. So I actually saved this for you guys. So this is a full one of some yarn that I just spun up. So I can take out the middle, and then take out arms. They're a little bit tight. This one's always the tightest too. And so I've got a ball of yarn. So it just kind of takes another step out of the process Plus, if you get some pretty colored roving, it looks really, really cool. Can't really see it because it's super dark on this one. So from there, as far as evolution of spinning, spinning wheels were invented, and that's also kind of an estimate. They think it's about 500 to 1000 AD is when spinning wheels were invented. Comes from India, and then it was kind of spread throughout other cultures. So you can still get spinning wheels today. They are super nice and super quiet these days. Mine is probably like 100 years old, and it is a squeaky, squeaky girl. So I have friends who have like the nice, super expensive, super modern. They get really compact. And yeah. So that's the brief history of spinning fibers. And then now I want to talk about why I am having you guys get wool and why the science of wool is is very good for spinning. So there's other fibers you can use besides for wool. There's alpaca. I know a farmer who has llamas that they're breeding to not only have the strength that llamas are known for in their fibers, but also they're breeding them to be softer. So trying to get them to be more of a, I don't even know what the word I'm looking for is. Trying to get them to be more of like a luxury fiber. I have some silk in my stash personally. Cotton is also well known, as well as historically stinging nettles are a fiber that you can spin. So once you get all of the like stinging nettle parts off of the plant and the leaves off, you can set them out to dry, and the fiber in the stem is actually apparently super soft once you process it. So our relationship with sheep as human beings, we started to domesticate and breed sheep to have woolen hair once or around 9,000 to 11,000 years ago. This started in Iran. So there's different types of hair that a sheep can produce. So there's hairy sheep that'll have sleeker kind of hair, kind of like what we have. And then there's woolen sheep. So there's the two different types. So we started breeding them to have more wool. There is still like hairy sheep. I think they're mostly bred for meat instead. But so the reason why we do woolen sheep, so why wool is so good. Controls, get out of the way. You are in my way. I found this lovely diagram here. So the first two are different types of wool. So you can see there's this scaly texture on a microscopic level for wool, especially in comparison to like silk. So the reason why this is important is because those scaly structures will actually help your wool catch itself. So it'll basically tangle a little bit easier with its own fibers. So like needle felting is basically the act of like agitating the wool so it tangles in itself, and then it's really hard to get apart. So this is really nice for making sure that when you put in the spin, it stays spun and it stays attached to the rest of the other fibers. So that is that on a microscopic level. Another reason why we are looking at wool is because it has what we call crimp. So if you have your roving, you can look at it. It's got this little bit of springiness. I don't know what else to call it but crimp. So it has this little bit of springiness, and this is important especially for cultures that are in cooler climates, such as myself, because what'll happen is with that crimp, it'll keep a lot of air between the fibers, which adds insulation. So the air Insulation means that you can keep heat in or regulate your body temperature a lot easier. It's also part of the reason why a lot of outdoors clothing companies are starting to use wool in their clothing as well, is because that air also adds breathability, which means that you're not getting a lot of like your sweat build up. So it's kind of moisture wicking as well. Another reason why we're looking at wool, there's this interesting oil that sheep's produce. It's kind of like same thing when you don't wash your hair for a couple of days, you kind of get that oil buildup. But they have a specific type of oil called lanolin. It's really cool stuff. So it's used a lot in like skincare products. So it's used a lot in lotions and ointments, lip balms. I think the one thing I was looking at said Carmex uses lanolin. Cosmetics, it can also be used as a leather treatment as well as lubricants. So it's this oil that the sheep produce, and if you ever go to a farm and you pet a sheep, it does kind of feel like you have a little bit of lotion, though it smells a little sheepy, but your hands are soft for like days after. So lanolin is actually also the reason for wool allergies. So it's not actually the fiber that people are going to be allergic to, it's the lanolin. And typically a lot of it is processed off during cleaning. But some places or some people still like to do what we call spinning in the grease, or basically spinning it dirty. The reason for that is because lanolin also has a slight waterproofing property. So you would think these floofy sheep standing out in the fields during the rain, you think that they would absorb a lot of water, but lanolin helps keep the water off, and so it doesn't hold in as much moisture, which is good for hygiene for the sheep. But that also means that we can use that to our advantage as well. So if you ever see like the stereotypical sailor or fisherman that's wearing like the nice cable knit sweaters, so the reason for that is that there's an Irish fishing community on the west coast of Ireland called on the Aran Islands. So what they would do is they would spin the wool while it still had all of that lanolin on it. So not only are the fishermen getting that insulation, but their sweaters are also waterproof. So that's why you see that. All right, so the next thing I have on the docket is actually making our spindle. So it's not going to be the perfect spindle, but it's easily accessible, and that's what's important. So I've got my dowel, and actually this step is really helpful if you have like a pin or a ballpoint pen. Anytime you're working with wood, you want what is called a pilot hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my pen and give it a little dimple in the middle of my dowel. So I've got that little dot, a little dimple. That is just going to tell your screw where it needs to be. And what we're going to do is we're going to screw it in first so that it's easier to get that that screw in where it needs to be, and then we're going to actually take it off and add the cap for your top whirl. So just take your time, sweet time with this. Try to get it to get in there as straight as possible. If you have, or if it kind of goes off kilter, it might make your bobbin or your spindle a little bit wobbly, and that's kind of frustrating at times. So I'm gonna take my time here, and once it starts kind of fighting you, if you want to use your pliers to kind of give it that little extra twist. So this is just to make sure that the screw has that path. And then I'm just going to go ahead and unscrew it. And then we're going to take our screw, our hook screw. I'm going to put it in my cap that already has that little hole in the middle. So screw, cap, and then we're going to add our shaft. And then try to get it tight, but don't do it so much that you break off any bits. I was doing this with my significant other, and mine have these little skirts, and he broke his off, and then spinning was no fun for him for a while. So I've got my makeshift spindle. It's a little crooked, but I think it'll be okay. And then we're going to talk about drafting before we actually get into using this bad boy. So you'll want to take your roving. So the lovely thing about roving is basically all of your fibers are already going the same way. So pulling it this way is going to be very different from pulling it this way. So you want to pull it this way. So drafting is basically the act of just pulling your fibers out a little bit at a time so that you get a thinner yarn. So like this amount is going to spin up to be far thinner than like if you just tried to spin this part. So one of the important things to learn about drafting is what we call a stable length. So loosely holding with this hand and then just taking a couple fibers from this end, we're just going to pull out a couple of little strands. So this is what we call stable length. It's basically the approximate length of your fiber. So with this stuff that I have here, it's probably like 3 inches long or so. And it differs with the different types of wools too. So like this is a super soft stuff, super soft merino that I have. So the stable length is probably like 1.5 inches. So you'll want to check that out basically anytime you get new wool. It'll help you in the long run. So mine's about 3 inches for the one that I'm going to be using today. So this is important because what you want to do for drafting is you'll want to loosely grab on with the side and then pinch this guy, pull it about 2/3 of your stable length. So I'd pull mine out about 2 inches, stop, and then we're gonna go back up the roving. So we're gonna pull a little bit more and stop, go back up the roving. So this is what we call pre-drafting. So you're drafting your fibers, but you're doing it before you actually start spinning. So what this is actually doing is it's giving a little extra so that it can grab onto the next set. So you're pulling out your fibers, but you're still leaving a little bit more so that it can pull on the next grouping. So this is drafting. And once you get pretty good at this, you can actually spin and draft at the same time. So I've got my pre-drafted bit. Now we're going to introduce our spindle. As you can kind of tell while you're doing your drafting, it doesn't have a lot of resistance, so like easily comes apart. Once you get a little bit of spin in it, it's going to resist you a lot more. And if things like that happen, you can just basically layer. And then once you get the twist in, it'll lock itself once more. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the end of our pre-drafted bit. We're going to kind of stretch it out a little bit so we can get it under our hook, under the hook. And then, so we have, this part is our end, this part is our feed. We're just basically making a little loop so that we have something to hang from. And then you can spin your spindle either clockwise or counterclockwise. Just kind of remember which way you go. I personally, for some reason, spin mine counterclockwise. I'm not entirely sure why, but it just feels comfortable for me. So we're going to get a little bit of spin into our yarns. So we've got a little bit of twist. You can see the space it takes up has gone down significantly. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to do park and draft. So we're going to get a little bit of spin. We're going to stop it, pause the spin. And then basically you're going to work in tandem with like your pinchies. So this pinchy finger is going to keep the spin from coming into the rest of my fiber. And this is going to give it a place to pause after. So I'm going to take this bit off and let the twist go in up more. And then we're going to spin a little bit more. We're going to pause it. So this actually is a little bit more helpful if you're using like your lap. I don't think I'm going to go like this. Okay. So if you're using your lap, you can pause by just putting the spindle in your lap and then moving your fingers. So holding the twist, we've got our untwisted fiber, giving it a place to stop. Actually, let me get the rest of my fiber in here. So giving it a place to stop, and then we're just going to let it twist in. So you'll notice too, I've got kind of varying weights. So like here is a lot thinner than like up here. And you'll notice too, I don't know what the physics are for it, but anytime there's a thinner spot, it's going to accumulate more twists than a thicker spot. So like this is really heavily twisted. This has got just like a slight twist to it. And that's just what happens. So again, I'm going to put this guy here. So we're spinning. We're going to get that twist in there. We're going to park it. And then let the twist go up your yarn. And this is park and draft. So getting a lot of twist in there. One thing to watch out for is if you have too much. So if you have too much, it's going to want to kind of collapse in on itself a little bit. My significant other, when he was doing it, he had a lot of twist. And then he was like, I don't know what it's doing, but it's not agreeing with me. And I was like, you have too much twist. Give it some more fiber to distribute on. So just let it go. Give it a spin. And then once you have, so I've got like 1.5 feet of yarn. So what we're going to do with this, because at some point you can only go so far vertically. Yes. So what we're going to do is your hook, we're going to make sure the fiber is on the back side of that hook so it doesn't fall off. And then we're going to wrap it down the side of your cap. And then we're going to roll it around your bobbin, the shaft of the spindle. But make sure you leave a little bit of room because you're going to want to bring it back up and be able to hook it. And if it helps, you can wrap it around the hook twice. That way it doesn't fall off while you're spinning. So now I am out of pre-drafted. So what we can do is basically the same thing. Just make sure that the twist isn't getting too far into your roving. But we're going to pause it, make sure that there is that pause pinch there. We're going to get some of that twist in there. We're going to park it. And then, so I'm keeping the twist from going up my roving. And then just like before, we're going to draft. Making sure I pinch this part so it doesn't get all the way into the roving, and just let it go. So again, we're getting, ooh, tangled. So we're getting a little bit of twist. Pausing the twist so it doesn't get into our roving. Drafting a little bit. And then letting that twist come in. Is that looking good and making sense? Okay. Just making sure. So yeah, you can keep practicing that. Once you get kind of good at drafting without pausing, you can, at some point, do both at the same time. So you can spin it and draft at the same time. I've seen people walking around with their spindles. And that kind of amazes me as well. And then, like, don't worry about the weight of your yarn. Like, I've got varying degrees of weight. It's fine. It's not a problem, especially if this is your first time spinning. Let me just get this wrapped, and I'll show you my very first time spinning. All right, so kind of an example of practice makes perfect. This is my very first ball of yarn. So when you're on your first thread, it's called a 1-ply. So this is my first yarn. It's 1-ply. Some people like to knit with it. I don't, but I keep this guy around for sentimental reasons. So this is my very first yarn. And you can see I still got some real chunky bits in there too. One of the things that I spun up recently is this. And this is actually 3-ply. So there are 3 threads piled in. So I've been spinning for maybe 2 years. And this is the progress that I've made. I was going to say something else. So you're probably still playing with your bobbin or your spindle and spinning a little bit. But I did also want to give you a quick lowdown on plying as well. So single ply, the reason why I don't like using it is because it's not a very solid yarn, especially if you're using a really soft wool, like a soft merino. It can come apart pretty easily and it can fray pretty easily. The twist will come out of it. So what you can do to strengthen your yarn is what we call plying. So plying is basically taking multiple strings and twisting them together. Typically what you see in Walmart or craft store, that's usually 3 or 4 ply. A lot of the times hand spinners will usually do 2. So I'm just going to give you a quick lesson on how plying works. So I spun up a little bit of this white earlier. I'm just going to get it off of my bobbin here. And I'm going to untie this guy a little bit here too, if I can, with all of my fingers. Sometimes spinning, there's a lot of coordination that needs to go with it. So I've got my orange that's still on here. I'm going to hook my white into it as well. So I've got both strings. So I know that I spin counterclockwise. And what you want to do when you're plying is actually go the opposite direction. So if you spin your singles going counterclockwise, you'll want to spin them going clockwise. And the reason for this is basically you are unspinning your first plies, your single plies, a little bit before bringing them together. So it kind of has those two opposing twists, and that'll keep them together easier. So I spin my singles counterclockwise, so I'm going to spin these clockwise. And kind of the same thing you can do where you do like put a little twist in, park it, give a little bit more room. And you'll want to kind of pull them a little tight so that you've got even distribution. So now I have white and orange double ply. And that'll make a stronger yarn. Plus it looks kind of fun. Kind of reminds me of a creamsicle. And we can put that there. And do a little more. But yeah, that's the basics of spinning. And a lot of people are kind of like, you can buy yarn at a store, so why would you hand spin? And the biggest reason for me is you can make one-of-a-kind yarns. So, for example, I've got some roving. Is it roving? I've got some roving that is this like dark green with these light green speckles. So anybody else who has bought the same type of roving might have the same type of yarn. But I also have this roving that glows under UV light and also has sparkles. So I added a little bit of touch in there. So they might have something that looks very similar, but it doesn't glow under black light. And I think that's cool. I don't know what else. I guess, do we have questions at all? I like questions. I'm good at questions.
Hey, and then feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions. I actually had one, if that's
Yeah.
okay. So it sounded like when you do the 1 ply, 2 ply, 3 ply, it doesn't necessarily mean like thickness. So if you have 3 that are super thin and you put them all together, it could still be like a super thin thread like you had before. It's just really strong. Yeah,
exactly. So how thick you make your single plies will also affect how thick your final product is. One thing that I did when I was learning how to do different weights is I was thinning them enough to do a 3 ply, and then when I went back to doing a 2 ply, I ended up with like lace weight yarn, and that's a little bit thinner than I typically like to knit with. So I was also like struggling to find the right project with that because I accidentally made it too thin. That's actually another thing is if you talk to a lot of spinners, they push themselves, so they always start thick. And as you learn, you kind of push yourself to get thinner yarn. But then they have struggles trying to get back up. So they end up with a lot of like lace weight yarn, and then they don't know how to go back up to like worsted, which is what you usually get at the craft store. How do you stop it how do you stop doing it without the yarn unspinning? So the park and draft method keeps it from unspinning. So if you park it, it should stop it from twisting in any direction. But if you are spinning and drafting at the same time. If basically the best way to keep it from unspinning is to just give it more fiber to twist onto. I don't know if I explained that right. Let me get an example. Ugh. So I'm going to use this one because it has better weight balance. And some nice spindles are actually pretty cheap. I think mine are usually around the like $20 to $25 range. So you spin and you keep drafting, and the spindle will want to keep spinning as long as it has something that isn't resisting it as much.
Oh.
So you get a decent spin where it doesn't come apart. Actually, that one decided it wanted to a little bit. And then it doesn't get that resistance of wanting to go the other way. So when you're done spinning, how do you stop? So what I typically do, if you're taking a pause, you can wind her up until you just have a little bit to hook around, and then just let it hang out like that. Is that kind of what you mean? I hope so.
I think they might mean, like, well, how do you do it when you're done with the whole yarn? Like, how do you wrap it up, I guess? Like, finish out the yarn?
So to finish off the yarn, oh, I should have brought the other thing in here. So you can do a couple of things to get it off the bobbin. So to get it off the bobbin, you can just kind of wrap it around something else, or there is what we call a niddy noddy, and I'm gonna draw a little diagram because I don't have mine in here with me. So it's basically like an eye shape. So it's basically like an eye shape like that, but it has one of the arms goes like this way and one of the arms goes this way, and you wrap it around that, and that's how you get like the nice little skeins. So you wrap it around that, and then you take it off, you twist it, fold it in half, and tuck it in on itself. So what do you want, or when you want to use your yarn, how do you stop so it doesn't unspin? So keeping it tight, tightly spun around something helps, like keeping it in a ball form or a cake form or like one of these. But then what you're going to do to set the spin is actually you're going to dunk it in some water.
Oh.
So wool kind of does this thing where it blooms when it's wet. So it'll kind of try to unravel itself a little bit. But then what you can do, and you'll have to be careful, don't do too hot of water. Just do like a nice cold water to set your spin. And then squeeze it out. Try not to rustle it too much because that could get felting. So try to squeeze it out a little bit without rustling it too much. And then you can just let it hang and it'll dry and it'll set the spin. I wonder if I have anything that hasn't been set in here yet. So I guess while I was playing with making sure that I got my little lecture down, so like this guy will still try to want to spin on itself. But if you kind of keep it tight, kind of like this, and then put it in some water, and then some people will like weigh down their yarn too. So you put it in some water, squeeze as much out as you can, and then let it hang. and it should keep it from unspinning. Plying also helps because the singles will want to try to unspin, but as it tries to want to unspin, it's just going to make the ply stronger because it's going to want to unspin in the same direction that your ply is twisting. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was thinking of like how at the end do you just I had no idea. I was like, do you just knot it like when you're done at the end, you know? But that's kind of not what wool does.
Sometimes you can just like let it go and it'll just kind of work itself out. Like the orange in this one just kind of petered out and it's fine. A lot of the times when you're knitting or crocheting, you have that little tail anyways that just gets chopped off in the end. So it's not too much of a worry because you're probably going to chop those ends off anyways. Does that kind of make sense? Making sure I'm actually answering the questions as they're asked and not just assuming what you're asking.
Feel free to drop your questions in the chat again, or if you would like to unmute, either way. And so it sounds like, do you think, and I'm sorry, I'm such a wool newbie, so the way that when you showed the microscopic different fibers, so it's because of the way that it's like really structured, is that it's able to, like when you wound it, like it's staying because it's all kind of like getting tangled up in those like little roots.
Yeah, so that helps a lot because it makes it more grippy. So like I've spun a little silk, and sometimes what happens with silks is that it's a little too sleek, and if there's like too much weight on your bobbin, it'll break and it'll fall. So it helps. It's a little bit more forgiving on that end. Like you can fill up a bobbin with like this much wool, but I don't know that at this same density of yarn, I don't know that silk could handle that much weight.
What's your favorite fabric to spin out of all the ones you mentioned?
So far I really like merino. So merino is a specific type of sheep that is bred to have a really soft wool. Sometimes they can be pretty long, and sometimes they can be a little bit smaller. Like this like light green stuff is probably the softest thing I have ever felt. Because there's also I wonder if I wrote down the term. There's also a measurement called a micron, which is the diameter of the fibers. So like this one has a really, really low micron. It is super, super thin, so it makes it super, super soft. But this orange stuff is a little bit rougher, and it probably has a significant higher micron rating. So merino is really nice because they're usually bred to have thinner hairs, and that makes it a lot softer.
Yeah, merino is fascinating. It has like for babies, like you know how it's used for swaddles and stuff, and it's amazing that it both keeps them cool and keeps them warm at the same time.
And actually on the same subject, lanolin is actually also used for a lot of baby stuff too, if they don't have an allergic reaction, because it's like waterproofing and moisture wicking. So like old fabric diapers, they would use lanolin on the covers so that if there was moisture, it would wick it away so your kiddo doesn't get any chafing or anything like that.
What's the most most favorite, that's not really how you put it. What's your favorite thing that you've ever like knit from your own wool that you made?
That's a great question. What have I knit from my own wool? I feel like I keep spinning it and then I forget to actually make stuff with it. I did make some gloves out of this guy, some like fingerless gloves, and those are, I think this is mostly merino too, so this is also super soft and super comfy.
Yeah, you can see how squishy it is, like how
Yes.
like malleable.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you sell your wool?
I haven't, because I'm pretty terrible about hoarding my own materials. Because there's a lot of times where like I make something and I'm just like, it would be really cool if I could make this. Like I actually want to make with that this green stuff. I kind of want to make like a cowl, so like a small scarf, but I also like really like monsters, and so I kind of want to make it so it has like a drip texture knit into it, and I think that would be really fun with the UV light and the sparkles that it has in it. But it's also been sitting here for at least a year, so
Future projects.
Future projects. It's always future projects.
Right. So you can get roving at any wool store, you said, or any fabric store generally?
Sometimes they have at like Joann Fabrics, sometimes they have like needle felting kits that usually have roving. There are specific shops, like local yarn stores, that will have some. I know, so I live in Sauk City. We have a small local yarn store, and I know that she has a very, very small collection of roving. But there's places like, I don't remember where it is, but I know it's called Susan's Fiber Shop, and I know that she specializes with spinning wheels and roving, and so she'll have that too. There's a lot of really good indie dyers on Etsy and on Instagram. I think like half of my Instagram follows are people who spin. So you can get some like really, really interesting stuff. Like I bought this guy, and it's black with a bunch of really light green speckles. You can get stuff like this where they kind of
Oh, wow.
dye different lengths, and depending on how you spin it up, it can look something like this. So this is what I've spun from that. So you
That's
can
beautiful.
get all these like lovely textures that our people are super into.
You know, I think I've seen someone actually make scarves just from their spun wool without actually knitting it.
Or they just wear it like this.
Yes, and then they wrapped it like an infinity scarf. So like it was an easy way.
That's so funny. I love that. There's this thing going around where people are like wearing them like crowns for Instagram posts. It was kind of cute too.
Oh, cool. Okay, well, I think we're kind of at our time. So unless we have any other questions, I think I'm just going to share screen again, if that's cool, and get to our last.
How long is your yarn before you stop to use it? That's a great question. I usually give up on spinning once the spindle kind of gets too heavy, where it just the wool just wants to break off. I've done that a couple times where I've been spinning and then the spindle will drop and fall off and hit the floor, and then I'm just like, I guess we're done with that one. But typically you need a decent amount of yardage to make anything significant. That's also what nitty knotties are for. So the eye-shaped thing is typically so that you can get approximate yardage. So I have a small one that measures every wrap is a single yard, and I have another one that is like a wheel, and it's every rotation is 2 yards. But yeah, so you can kind of go as long as you want, but sometimes the weight of the spindle just kind of decides you're done.
Alrighty, I will go to share screen. Maybe. Oh, here. Okay. I shall go to share screen. And hopefully start from this slide. So yeah, wrap up in next steps, kind of literally what you were just talking about, going through your roving and finishing up, and then putting it in water, and you have your awesome new wool.
Yeah.
And if you complete your next steps, then congratulations, you will have completed step 2 of the Senior Science of Style badge. I think that's it, unless you have any last feedback or advice for our wool spinners.
I mean, if you want, I can give like an email address if they have extra questions, or I'm on Instagram and I post a lot of weird art things as well as things that I've spun. The great thing about the spinning community is that you can ask them questions on like any social media, and a lot of the times they're super helpful about it. So if you do get into spinning, buy some spindle, like some nice spindles, some nice roving, and you have questions, just like look up hand spun yarn on Instagram, and and you can find some really, really cool things that a lot of people are producing. And then if you have questions, they're really good about answering those questions.
Awesome. Do you want to drop your email in the chat? I think both our participants today have it, so they can see that. And if you feel comfortable about your Instagram, if you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so I'm just going to put my personal one in here. That's fine. Okay. And then Insta, I am. And then there's my Insta. Because I know sometimes, I don't know, emails feel a little too formal. So I totally get that. So I'm usually checking Instagram more than I should. And yeah, here to answer questions. Spinners love it when new people start spinning. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for presenting today. And thank you both, Charlene, Peyton, and Riley, all for coming. As you can see, always check on gsbadgerland.org for more virtual activities. You have Chrisetta's info, so if you'd like to connect with her just to, chat further about wool spinning or felting, like I totally heard that. I'm like, ooh, felting. That's something I've always wanted to do.
Fun.
But yeah, otherwise feel free to email us, the council, at info@gsbadgerland.org. And if you want to take a picture and show off your new wool, you can also do it with hashtag Badgerland at home.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you at future events.